Welcome everyone. My name is Mette Morsing. I am the head of Prime Principles for Responsible Management Education at United Nations Global Compact. It is a huge privilege for me today to welcome you to this panel, which is a very timely, very relevant panel at the United Nations Global Compact Impact Forum. Because what we are going to talk about in this panel is new aspirations for global impact, and how we are going to reimagine how the purpose of higher education and the impact-based university, which is a concept that I'm very excited to be listening over the next hour or so to how our panel will reflect upon. But what can be more relevant now than impact, youth, and education, and in the context of the SDGs in this deep. Business schools' impact for society does not necessarily mean the same across business school size, where we are geographically located, what our political landscapes are, and what our social and cultural spheres tell us to do. So what better context for discussion on what impact is, how we can improve our impact, and how we can measure it than in a UN context, and of course today in a prime UN context. So on this brief note, a warm welcome to the panel and to Urs Jäger, who is a professor at INCA in Costa Rica and also a professor at St. Gallen in Switzerland. And it's a warm welcome to you, Urs, and to this expert panel here today. And Urs, you have been engaged with academia and practice and impact for quite a number of years. So just to let you know, the audience out there, that you are in the best of hands right now. Please, Urs Jäger, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for your introduction. Just to add the framing that you make, why is the topic relevant that we're going to focus on right now? The impact-based university. The current paradigm in the industry of business and management school is focused on what we call research-based universities. This means that schools mainly become rewarded for their research. The incentives of the schools are therefore less on impact. And like Mette presented before, this is what we want to talk about. What is impact and how to support business and management schools to create impact? And to discuss and explore this topic, we have quite an interesting and high-level panel. I'm glad to have you all. We have Inasa Okoneda. She's Dean and Professor of the Lagos Business School based in Nigeria. And I'm quite happy to hear more about your perspective from Africa and how you see this topic in respect to impact and in comparison to Northern Hemisphere business schools. We have Tim Mescron from AACSB. He's Executive Vice President and Chief Officer for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa for AACSB International. And Tim, in our preparation call, you told me that you have good news. I'm looking forward to hear this good news again. We have Sanjeev Kargam from the Thunderbird. He's Director General and Dean of the Thunderbird School of Global Management. In our previous call, Sanjeev, you explained to me how you already changed with your teams the strategy of the school before the crisis and how this made the school now extremely agile during the crisis, and the topics become even more important. We're looking forward to hear that. We have Wilkem Meinhardt. He's Policy Director of the Rotterdam School of Management. And Wilfred, in our previous discussion, you told me you are also the head of a strategy team that is focusing right now not on the crisis, but on the question, how does our school look like after the crisis? We're looking forward to hear your thoughts on this and what you're going to discuss. Welcome, Wilfred. And last but not least, we have Andrew Chack. He's Global Education Editor from the Financial Times. Andrew, we saw us before, but you don't look like that, but I guess you're the big elephant in the room. As right now, most of the careers of the professors in the business schools are measured by what you are publishing, the Financial Times journalist. In that sense, I guess how you are working, you're one of the most powerful in the industry right now, pushing the industry in the direction, and we're happy to have you here on the board. Andrew, welcome. Tim, How about starting with the good news? So what is AACSB and what's the good news you have?
Great. Well, Urs, it's such a pleasure to be here today and honored to serve with this distinguished group of colleagues. I have the great pleasure of representing AACSB International. We're the oldest, the largest accreditor of business schools in the world. Today, over 1,700 members in 105 countries or territories. Urs is right. It was only on July 28th this summer when our accredited schools, and of course that includes both Thunderbird and the Lagos Business School, my colleagues, as well as, of course, Rotterdam, our first accredited school in the Netherlands at Erasmus, voted to approve new standards. These referred to as the 2020 standards are all wrapped around the AACSB mission, which says we transform business education for global prosperity. But particularly embedded in these new standards, exactly to Urs' point, are standards 8 and 9, the final two standards of the 9 standards. Standard 8 talks about the topic that Urs raised, the impact of scholarship. And to me, what is so exciting here, and let me use this as a teaser, we specifically state in this standard that the school's portfolio of intellectual contributions, whether they are basic theoretical, whether they're applied, or whether they're pedagogical, should have a positive societal impact consistent with the school's mission. So I'm very excited to talk about that. These words are very intentionally crafted in these new standards, and I think tie specifically to the topic of this panel. In Standard 9, I'm even more enthused about. Standard 9 says the school demonstrates positive societal impact through internal and external initiatives and or activities consistent with the school's mission, strategies, and expected outcomes. Meaning we insist on the standards require demonstration of positive societal impact. And I look forward, Urs, to talking about this over the course of this session.
Thank you, Tim. Sanjeev, did you know about this? And what is your reaction on it?
We did know about this, and we are delighted and thrilled. We want to thank Tim for his leadership, AACSB International for their leadership in advancing this. It couldn't come at a more important time in human history and global history and planetary history. Certainly the last 6-7 months of the pandemic, obviously Black Lives Matter, but also all around the world, the demands for equity, inclusion, of impact have warranted this. And it's a long time coming, I must say. And so for us at Thunderbird and Arizona State University, where our charter at the university is we judge ourselves by who we include, not who we exclude. And as you know, at Thunderbird with ASU, what we really pride on ourselves is global inclusion, innovation, and impact. Innovation, inclusion, impact at global scale. So we feel right and aligned with this, and in many ways, we're happy that AACSB has just legitimated what we were already doing.
Sanjeev, do you have one of the examples that impressed you most in the last year in respect to inclusion in your business school?
Yeah, so I think I want to give two. One is that we have launched a task force. We call it the Global JEDIs, JEDIS, Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Sustainability. It is a multi-stakeholder task force consisting of students, faculty, staff, alumni. As many of you know, we have 46,000 alumni in 140 countries around the world, including a phenomenal chapter in Lagos, Nigeria, which I hope we can connect with Ines and the wonderful Lagos Business School, one in Rotterdam, all over the world, as well as partners. And the focus of this is to advance local, national, and international work that really contributes to impact in society. And in part of that, two immediate efforts have already taken place. among many, actually. And the idea is we're going to have a 5 to 10 year plan, but we don't want to wait for that 5 to 10 year plan. We wanted to get started. The first is that for every faculty that hiring process we have, the candidates will have to include a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement as part of their application to us as a school and as a university. And we will take that very seriously in who we select to be interviewed and ultimately to be part of our incredible distinguished faculty. So that's number one. Number two is that we have built some partnerships with major institutions to actually advance this work on the ground. So there's a wonderful organization called International Bridges to Justice based out of Geneva. They strengthen public defense systems around the world, public defenders. Our eyes have really focused on, police and institutionalized racism here in the United States, but all over the world, having to do with historically marginalized people. But underlying that is a lot of pillars of the justice system, and public defense is one of them. And you might say, well, why would a business school or a global leadership and management school care about that? Well, it turns out that the business community really needs a rule of law. It needs a society in which the rules work and where ordinary citizens are protected and their rights are advanced. This all aligns with our oath of honor. And in our oath of honor, which all students have to sign on to, pledge to when they join us, and as they graduate, there are three fundamental principles. First, we support and defend the rights and dignity of all people. Number two, we oppose all forms of corruption and exploitation. And three, we advance sustainable and equitable prosperity worldwide. And so we hold true to those principles in this task force and all the work that we're trying to do. Very quickly, the other one is our historical model at the school was global management, leadership and management, international affairs, international political economy, culture, and languages. That was the sort of unique magic of Thunderbird. And we hold true to those three. But to that, we've added three complementary ones. One, a major focus on the fourth industrial revolution, new technologies, emerging technologies, AI, internet, no longer emerging, very much real and current. Second, diversity, equity, inclusion. And third, sustainability in the circular economy. And so all of our programs, from our programs for women entrepreneurs at the bottom pyramid, our undergraduate programs, our graduate programs, our exec ed program, everything has that set of six critical pillars. So we're well on our way to aligning with this wonderful new announcements of AACSB.
Your faculty also needs to sign your oath?
Yes, everyone, the whole community, alumni, community, faculty, staff. It is part of the core fundamental values that are very much aligned with the Global Compact, with PRIME, with the 10 universal principles that we all espouse through the Compact, the SDGs. We've put the SDGs at the center of our work with our students and everything that we do. And we co-run at ASU, Arizona State University, with our College of Global Futures and School of Sustainability, our SDG university-wide task force. So, in every way, both as a school, but also as part of the broader university and in the world at large, we are making sure that we're playing an important role in the leadership role.
Enaze, obviously inclusion is a key part in Thunderbird. What does inclusion mean for you in Nigeria?
Well, I think that first of all, let me just say that I share Sanjeev's enthusiasm and delight for the new standards of AACSB. I think that is awesome. It's fantastic because for many years now, as a school operating out of Africa, it's been quite challenging, wanting to be recognized as a global school and have, at the same time, have this impact on society. And very many times, it seemed like, there was a disconnect between the aspirations on both sides. On the one hand, it was this aspiration to be on the map and be seen as a global school, which came about through, the publications on top journals. And in the other was really how we were relevant in the society and what should we be doing, what type of research and applied research. So just to say that, I'm absolutely delighted at, the new standards from AACSB. When we talk about inclusion in environment, it's somewhat different. In the country in which we operate there, it's a hugely diverse society. So here we have, in Nigeria, we have 250 tribes and 400 languages. And therefore, for me, inclusion had a different connotation from what it was that you saw in the other side. It's not only about the inclusion of socially disadvantaged pupils or students that can come to the school. It's also about ensuring that we're able to reach people from all over who would of the country not have access to the same quality of education as in other parts as well. I think that a couple of things that Sanjeev has said that I think are worth copying, if I may say so blatantly. But we will take a cue from that and see what it is that we can do to further inclusion in our environments.
Wilfred, if you listen to what Sanjeev and Naze told, what can you learn for your new strategy out of this?
Yes, I'm really enjoying this session. Thank you so much for sharing these passionate stories. I like to get back to what Tim started with. RSM was the first school in Europe to be AACSB accredited, and that was a major game changer for RSM in terms of strategic development. It's interesting thing that we are now 20 years further, and that the same standards are being renewed, and that the same organization challenges the industry again. And not only from moving from teaching-driven to research-driven, but again from research-driven to impact-driven. And all these passionate stories end up in institutional, say, realities. And what I like to focus on is not so much the operational initiatives we have, but the change pattern we're in. And if you see that we aspired the research so much in the model that we built 20 years ago, including the faculty model. And slowly but surely you saw kind of what I call the responsible turn in the industry, where we discovered that there's limits to growth and productivity of research. There might be different routes for relevance and engagement. And you see those values more and more come into the missions of the school now. And that is wonderful to see, that we, as an industry, move into a more engaged reality with all the wonderful examples we just hear, and there are plenty of them. And that's wonderful. But there's also a risk, I would say. And that's the pattern of business schools, the tendency to outsource stuff. And, you know, when we became research-driven, we, in fact, massively outsourced the academic judgment to the journal editors. And we became a very competitive industry because of that. And now that we move to more engagement and impact-driven, we somehow tend to do the same. We tend to now even outsource our purpose. What do I mean with that? We collectively adapt external formulated SDG values and other standards as our purpose in business school. And that's interesting. Why is it interesting? Because if we are not critical and mission-driven, and here again comes in AACSB, if it is not mission-driven, but more like mimicry, then in fact we're doing the same thing that we did 20 years ago with research. And I would use this session to leverage the strategic approach towards engagement and impact by using the maturity and the strength of schools that I've built now through accreditation to make it a strategic effort. And I think only in that say new way, probably we can reach the maturity of impact-driven state in a much more industry-wide manner than individual-wise. And that's the first introduction I would like to make to this panel.
Andrew, if this is what Wilfred says, true for the whole industry, then we make a huge strategic mistake. So we are outsourcing core topics to the market. Research, the fundraising, and now even the purpose. How do you see this? How do you evaluate this? Are you sharing this observation?
Well, I think there clearly is lots of outsourcing. And of course, in many sectors of the economy globally, that's raising a matter for concern. I mean, I'd certainly like to think that first and foremost, if you're a student looking to study, or you're a business leader, for example, looking for insights and thought leadership, or indeed a faculty member looking for a home to teach and research, then you want to understand the culture and you want to be drawn into a particular organization that shares your values. I mean, there's no doubt that you see this growth in, let's say, alliances and partnerships between business schools and links with other sorts of organizations. I think to a certain extent that can be very healthy to kind of enrich the offer and the networks. But I think there has to be a core system at the heart of all this. And I think we're a long way from that in terms of particularly some of these themes that we've been talking about here around societal impact. I think that it's great to hear what Tim was talking about with the AACSB, and I know the other key accreditation agencies, Equus and Amber, for example, are also trying to engage a lot more around societal impact. There are networks like the Responsible Research Network for Business Management that's also engaged very much in a reflection at the moment. And I've talked to our colleagues here, including Anase and Wilfred, Sanjeev, about these issues and how we, for instance, the FT, can play a role in trying to showcase excellence and how to develop metrics and information that can help lift all boats, if you like. So I think that's a really important and pivotal challenge going forwards. But we have to be conscious also that many students and many stakeholders around business schools have other priorities, whether it's their own internal and institutional and conservative, perhaps forces that are pulling them in different directions. And there's many people, you know, putting it bluntly, in a world and in a business environment where business schools teach return on investment and where many of them are charging very high fees actually for the nature of the education they're providing, it's not surprising that many of the students and the alumni still value many, many different factors alongside ESG, shall we say, or societal impact. And so we have to think about a real transformational effort by the sector to refocus, to reprioritize, and to de-block in order to focus on the issues that really matter.
Yeah. And I think, and
please, Wilfred.
To add to that, I think technology available to us can really be a blessing at this moment. There's so much data around us. There's so much intelligence, and making smart use as an industry of those, say meaningful intelligence sources, and create a collective, say, forum or dialogue on the most important indicators that we want to reach as an industry is, I think, very, very, very feasible at the moment. I give you one example. Recently, I developed an SDG mapper to make sure that we can check all the SDG relatedness of publications. And I took a data set of 75,000 publication records in the FT50 list and the University of Texas Dallas list, all the publications of this century. And the interesting thing is this. We think SDGs started, and the content around SDGs started in 2015. But if you look at this century publications of business schools, of the top 100 business schools, the Triple Crown schools, you see that SDG-related research was already happening early this century. And that, in fact, it started to peak a bit more after 2015. But the relevance of our research in the top journals was already substantially there. And the nice thing is that if you look at that longer pattern, that you see that the passion for the topics that are framed in 2015 in a specific manner were already happening in business schools for many years. And I think this is an element of proudness that we can be proud of as an industry, and that we don't, that there's, say, not so much a rigor relevance gap, because you see the top journals are doing relevant SDG related stuff. And combining that industry level intelligence, that's my point, to make a robust argument that we matter and that we care about engagement and about the sustainable development.
But Wilfred, I looked on your research, quite interesting. Maybe you want to share it here with everybody.
I
You
share
focused more on 3 topics of SDGs, and these are all market-driven topics. So there was a clear preference on that.
The interesting thing is that both schools and journals, you can map the entire entity on the SDGs. And what you see is that we don't cover all the SDGs. We're not comprehensive universities. We focus on, if you look at the wedding cake model, we look at people and we look at economy. We don't look so much really at planet and biosphere in business schools. And maybe that's also very, very useful to know, because then we can position ourselves on the things we're good at, and that's economy and that's people. And I think we're focusing on those. Yeah.
Andrew, one second. I would like to break it a little bit more down, the question of purpose. Yeah. So you said we outsource, but now, Andrew, you also said we need to strengthen the purpose. Sanjeev, what does this mean now for Thunderbird? How do you break this down? How do you create this purpose? And how do you implement this?
Well, first of all, I just would say that, Wilfred, I really appreciated what you shared and the research that you all have done on the SDGs. For us at Thunderbird, I have to say, with all respect, we are focusing very much on planet. So, for example, we published a major report on carbon removal opportunities for the planet. There's $3 to $5 trillion of private sector business opportunities for carbon removal annually that's available out there with technological and natural solutions. These is a source of new enterprises, startups, investment opportunities. We need far more business schools to do research on this new green economy, global Green Deal, whatever frame you want to talk about it. We have to empower our students and faculty to be engaged right on this, because it is our social obligation. And certainly for us, going back to AACSB, as our mission, as Tim knows, is, our vision is a world of sustainable and equitable prosperity. And our mission is to empower global leaders and managers to maximize the benefits of the fourth industrial revolution and advance a circular economy. So in my view, that's where it starts. It is AACSB mission. What is your mission? And all of our missions have to be about impact as much as, and everything has to lead to that impact. Now, we're very fortunate, Urs, we're a part of a wonderful broader university, Arizona State University, which I mentioned the fundamental charter. We have 8 design aspirations, including making sure all of our research is use-inspired and community impactful, transdisciplinary. And so that creates an incredible enabling environment for us to be purpose-driven, to be part of a large public university that sees its responsibility to give back and to support the community. Yep. The third thing I just say is that, as Anissa was saying, different contexts on the world that, will drive what inclusion and impact means. For us as a global business school that happens to be headquartered in the United States, we now have 12 regional centers of excellence around the world, from Nairobi to Dubai, from Geneva to Tokyo. We're growing to 25, building partnerships with all sorts of our business school colleagues and universities, as well as the private sector and public sector. We see our role as being part of a larger global movement to transform and towards the stakeholder capitalism that we desperately need in the 21st century. So those are some of the ways, Urs, that we're really trying to advance at Thunderbird.
Yeah. Enaze, you mentioned before that you had quite big challenges to balance the trade-off between creating impact and making research. Now you hear Wilfred explaining already the research is focusing on impact. How do you see this trade-off? Is there a trade-off or isn't there a trade-off? Enaze, are you there? If not, Tim, might I ask you this exact? Now she's
there. Enaze,
please.
Okay. So thank you. So yes, there was a trade-off before, and it was hard trying to achieve a balancing act between who we wanted to be and the impact. So we knew that as a school, we wanted to be relevant and we wanted to impact society, but we also had aspirations. And for very many years, it was a huge struggle, even with the accrediting agencies, the accrediting bodies that would come and take a look at the research and start to say, oh no, you need to be publishing here. And yes, we knew that, but we thought that our essence was focused on helping business, because the way we've always looked at business and the role of a business school it was a question of what is the purpose of our existence? Is it to help businesses or is it to help humanity through business? And therefore, if we're going to help humanity through business, what is it that we should be teaching to these business people? What should we be researching in that brings those solutions that are relevant and address the social and economic problems of Africa as a continent? So yes, it was a trade-off, and one that I must say that I think that to a large extent, we did pay the price. It took us a long time to get accredited. And after a while, we sort of thought, okay, you know what, now let's see how we're going to be able to achieve both. But like I mentioned earlier on, it's starting to change now. And of course, with this new standard and others thinking, it doesn't have to be a trade-off any longer.
Because of the topics, you say, Tim.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with what's been said. You know, we have to remember, yours. We've got three very distinguished colleagues on this panel from world-famous institutions. But the constellation of business schools across the globe looks quite diverse itself. And so each of these schools, again, as Sanjeev said, and Inase reinforced, driven by their respective missions, helps craft and define the impact that they deliver locally. For some schools, it will be exclusively locally. And if you look closely at our standards, as you and I talked about, it can even mean providing a pathway for a first-generation young woman or man in their family to have the opportunity to study at university. To me, this is also a unique kind of societal impact that has to be acknowledged and celebrated, as well as impact having much larger global scale. So again, it's tied to the institution, tied to its unique mission, and that will in fact looks differently in Tempe than it does in Lagos, than it does in Rotterdam, and all points across the globe, as it should. And I think that's something very important we should remember.
So we learned, Inase, before we had a trade-off between research and impact. Right now, it's going more together, that we create agendas that are focusing on the relevant issue. And we learned now from Tim, this kind might be more regional. Andrew, but in the end, it's also about costs. We made analysis how much you need to pay for publishing a journal paper. In Switzerland, Swiss prices, $300,000. What can you do with $300,000 to create impact emerging markets? How do you see this, Andrew? Just to inform everybody, we have a technical challenge. We can only see the four of us, so we need to get in and step out regularly. Andrew.
Can I just jump in, Urs, while we're waiting for Andrew to jump back in? Sure. I mean, I want to just give two examples. Oh, there he is. There's Andrew. I'll yield the virtual floor.
I'll try to open it up so you could reply. I mean, but yeah, look, I mean, we could have a whole panel about the costs of research and the challenges of academic publishing and how that's evolving. But, you know, if the sort of wider question is there a tension, let's say, between research and teaching, or an issue about having impact in business schools? I don't think there needs to be. I mean, to me, we talked about outsourcing at the start. Personally, I think there is a fundamental difference between those who are good researchers and those who are good teachers. Arguably, you could split the two entirely. Some schools might combine them well. Others could do one or the other. But, you know, business schools, like other professional service and expertise schools, if you like, to me, are fundamentally about impact. And if they're not delivering that, both in their teaching, but also in their research, it should be practical, applied, insightful, then they probably don't deserve to be in business. Shall I put it like that? In terms of the wider issue, and going back to Wilfried's point as well, and we've discussed this a lot, I think metrics are fundamentally important. I think there are some things that can only be captured a little bit anecdotally or qualitatively, let's say, and I think we've all got a role to showcase excellence like that. But I think there's a core set of activities that can and should be measured to allow comparison and benchmarking and partnership and so on. And I think what Wilfried's been doing around sort of mapping research to the SDGs, for example, is a great start. My challenge to this whole community, including those of you watching, is, going the next steps, because there's a danger of quite crude quantification, shall I say. The fact that a school says it's doing activities around the SDGs is great in principle, but what does it really mean? Is it really impact? And I think what I would love to see, and I hope, different networks, including Prime and the RRBM network and many of our colleagues here, both within business schools and also in business and society, really can try to come together to kind of think, what metrics could we use to really measure the value? So we're not just, to stereotype a little bit, sort of writing a paper that says, here's an interesting piece of research about SDG 4, but we're actually saying, are there fresh, original, impactful, implementable insights in this research? Is it delivering a result? Is it being taken up by government, by policymakers, by executives in companies? To me, that's impact that matters. And so I think we need to go beyond this explosion in quite crude, blunt data towards really more refined measures that are meaningful and can help guide the agenda to all of our benefits.
Do you have an example that you think about?
Well, I think, we, for example, we have been trying to drive reforms of our measures, our rankings around sustainability and responsible business. I found it, it's a really interesting and rewarding conversation, but it's also quite frustrating because everyone says, you should take into account more sustainability and responsible business. I say, I agree. Now give me the metrics to use. And then the conversation falls rather silent, So we said, okay, let's do a quick and dirty. You can find this on ft.com/RBE, incidentally, Responsible Business Education. We said, let's just get the schools to send us what they think they're doing that's impactful. And then let's put that to an outside group of stakeholders for them to judge. And let's try and not rank, but let's try and come up with a selection of interesting best practices. So that was the first stage. The second stage is saying, okay, now schools send us some research output that you're doing that you consider important. And then let's see if we can try to distill some metrics around that. So it's far from perfect, but we've tried to use some bibliometrics, altmetrics. We've tried to say, what does the wider community say? So we can look at citations, of course, but we can look at resonance on social media. We can try to look at that sweet spot in the middle, which is, meaningful engagement. Is it being picked up by policymakers, by governments, by companies? It's hugely challenging to do, but I think that's the way we need to go. So to try to find metrics for the wider implementation, the wider resonance, the broader conversation with society. And that's the next stage, is where I'd love everybody here's help and suggestions around.
Wilfried, so how to measure impact? From Andrew, we know we need to have indicators. Timothy says we need to make it more locally and contextually driven. What do you think in your strategy? How to measure impact of the school?
Those are very, very relevant. For example, in Rotterdam, we just did the BSIS impact study. I think we're the 40th school who applies this scheme. And I thought, why invent the wheel if there's such a wonderful scheme already invented by the French schools? And I just applied it. And the interesting things that come out of that is that you rediscover, in a school that has been preaching internationalism and global business for 20 years, you rediscover where your feet are on the ground, in which innovation ecosystem you live. We discovered that in the wider region, in the west of the Netherlands, the so-called Randstad region, there's 1,100 companies with 500 or more employees. 1,100 companies, yeah? And we, not based on our own alumni information system, because it was a bit crappy, we used an external database called Orbis. And Orbis is a database where all the Chamber of Commerce data are collected globally. And the nice thing is they also collect the statutory directors. So mapping the Orbis database to the graduation database of Erasmus University delivered an amount of more than 300 statutory positions being filled by our alumni. Meaning talking about the metric, so the penetration in the leadership of 500 plus companies in the Randstad region is for an international business school like RSM a pretty nice ratio. And I'm not bragging about it because it might have been 70 if we did a better job. But having business schools in the leadership roles for what Inasa said, business is the changing factor. And how we enable businesses with our talent and our research and our engagement. And this is a very simple, maybe blunt ratio, but it's a ratio of penetration into the leadership roles. And I have 10 indicators like that discovered in this excavation in the region in the last half year. And RSM rediscovers its roots. And I think post-corona, this is a very important thing to do. Yeah, you have a regional ecosystem to serve. And based on your mission, you find your metrics. Yeah.
Right.
Let's follow the.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say very quickly. Was going to comment. I think Wilfred is spot on. If we look at the development, and you and I talked about this of metrics around the B Corps in the corporate arena around ESG reporting, it has evolved over time. And to Andrew's point, I think this process will naturally evolve as we convene more and more colleagues, either regionally, globally, at whatever level, and they begin to share, they begin to demonstrate their ability to capture metrics that indicate levels of impact and performance. And I know there's a big rush, but I think this is going to look very differently in different locations. And it's going to take some time to capture consistent ways to measure this impact that are acceptable to broader audience.
But we don't have to do this alone. I think. If I may I disturb you in your
very briefly, please.
Yeah. There's professionalism in the stakeholder community, and an example for me is the Global Compact community. 12,000 or more companies have defined regional action lines that are relevant to their stakeholder community in the region. And if we would only sense that right and connect to the professional level of stakeholder articulation and map our own unique contribution to that, then it's not rocket science to connect. And and that's maybe also a nice link from PRME to Global Compact, to engagement, to impact. You see that the puzzle is falling in, the pieces are sticking together here, slowly but surely. And I hope that the message that Andrew gave about the forum working and the industry level dialogue we can now do through PRME, through RBM, with stakeholders like FT, and also the journal editors, for example, that are represented in RBM, in the RBM board. We have the global forum, in fact, in place, and I think we should use these elements together to make the next decade not a decade of principles like the last one, but a decade of action.
Perfect. Allow me to follow the line of relation to business, Sanjeev.
Yeah.
In the end, we want to have our salary. In the end, we want to create income for our business schools. Yeah. Some of us, we are lucky, we're more public, but even there we need to struggle. Some of us are in the market. We made analysis of the executive education market. How many sustainability courses are out there where you really can make money from a business school? There are not a lot. So how do you see, Sanjeev? Are you creating here an idea that is not connected to business, or what does it mean?
I think inversely, and when we look on our executive education side, for example, let's just use your point right there. The 3 or 4 areas we get the most amount of demand, pre and even accelerated since the pandemic, are number 1, digital transformation, and fourth industrial revolution, industry 4.0. Every industry company is struggling more or less with this. Number 2 is their corporate citizenship. How are they engaging stakeholders? How are they contributing to society? How are they advancing SDGs? We're getting tons and tons. Circular economy. How do we integrate these principles? SABIC, one of the largest petrochemical companies in the world, has a circular economy strategy. They want to train their professionals. We're working with them to do that. We're launching a digital certificate on circular economy, not just with business school professors, but with, scientists from our School of Sustainability. It forces us to get out of our comfort zone, but I actually think we're getting. The third area is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I completely agree with an essay. That depends on regional context, how that is, how that takes place. But when we're talking about global companies, they're always thinking about what we have always been a leader in, is global mindset, global diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that's a third major area of import. And the fourth is really, for the big companies, entrepreneurship and innovation, right? Those are and there's a wonderful synergy amongst those. So in fact, since the pandemic, we've actually done remarkably well on executive education, partly because we can do digital delivery at the highest quality level in the world, but a lot because these are the topics and the themes that really got even more in demand since the pandemic and because of the pandemic. So I actually think there's a huge market.
But digital transformation
that's happening going forward. I'm sorry.
Digital transformation and the other topics you mentioned.
Yes.
How are they related to sustainability topics and SDG? How do you integrate them?
So there's a wonderful initiative we're working on with the World Economic Forum, is how to utilize fourth industrial revolution, fourth IR, Industry 4.0, digital transformation to advance circular economy, to advance sustainability, to advance sustainable growth and prosperity. So many companies are looking for ways to use data analytics, AI, machine learning to reduce costs, to increase profits, and to contribute to society economically, socially, and environmentally. There are so many win-win opportunities. And unfortunately, out there in the world, we're in a world of extremes, polarization. Everyone wants to fight with everyone. We as business schools have the remarkable opportunity to say there will be trade-offs. There are always trade-offs, but there are also tons of win-win opportunities. So if we can be leaders in creating and advancing these win-win opportunities, we can take the world a long way, and businesses will benefit and profit alongside it. And the best CEOs are doing that. Ask, Andre, the CEO of Philip Morris International, of all companies, what they're trying to do with PMI. We're seeing this in every industry, in every sector.
So what I learned from you is we shouldn't focus on educating the specialists on sustainability, but always combining those with the topics. So educating a specialist on digital transformation and including the sustainability topic in it.
Well,
how do you see
Global Compact too? We have this Young Social Innovators program that companies then bring in their young, emerging talent, rising performers, and they want them, and they know. I mean, let me just say, the biggest one is acquisition of talent. And we know that Gen Y, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, they care about these issues. If companies want to get the best talent, they have to do this. So it's an imperative for these companies.
So it's an integral model, not a specialist model. Anais, how do you see that?
Okay, thank you. I think that I agree with the approach that Sanjeev said is precisely the approach that we take at the school as well, because we've always looked at it as not separate from business, but a part across all functional areas. So with the key issues of, for instance, sustainability, with ethics, with responsibility, across all the various disciplines that we have, it's taught not only as a core course, but a certain percentage across, be it marketing or finance, there it is integral to business. So I think we take the same approach, because our idea is that we're developing not only the current, but also the future implementers, the ones who will go on to work in organizations that should very much have these SDGs in mind. And therefore, we can't divorce their knowledge and the actions from the various disciplines, which are essential to high performance within an organization. So we also, we believe the same and we do the same.
But let's continue there a little bit. When you say we, from the perspective of Africa, when we
from the perspective of the school. From the school.
Let's change now the perspective to Africa. If we listen now to the discussion of research, and everybody says Everybody can make research, and it's quite open, so you need to have the best researchers, just hire them. But if you look on the map, where are the research really coming from that are published in the high-level journals? And you see that on spot, it's from the north. It's not from the southern hemisphere. If you look on the trade-off, is $300,000 you need to invest for it? What can you do in emerging markets? How do you see similarities and differences in the discussion on that we just had in comparison of the Northern Hemisphere and Africa?
Yeah. Well, no, very different. And I think that in my in the first couple of remarks that I made, I did allude to that, about the challenge between the aspirations of a school in the developing world that aspires to be a global school and at the same time wanting to be relevant in their environment as well. So obviously, when we spoke about, whether there is a trade-off, yes, there is a trade-off in that regard. So, but the research that I think that schools in Africa or developing nations need to be focused on, but perhaps maybe I digress a bit, to speak about what Timothy had mentioned about the mission of each one. Who are you? Who do you want to be? How relevant do you want to be in your environment there? So for instance, we made the choice at Lagos Business School to focus on applied research that is targeted at solving Africa's social and institutional problems. We knew that these ones were not going to be the top at the time, many years ago, to publish in the top journals, because like you say, when we looked at it, we had North America on one side, the rest of the world on the other side there. However, what was paramount in our mind was being true to that mission as well. So we have that. And just to speak briefly to something that Wilfred had spoken about, the context is very much, it comes in a lot, because when we talk about, preparing people for big businesses in a continent like Africa, where you have about 90% or slightly over 90% of the businesses that are actually small businesses that employ less than 10 people, I mean, what are you going to do with that? What are you preparing them for? How are you going to look? So, the context certainly is critical in the conversation.
Wilfred, I'm sorry, we need to look at the time.
Okay.
The key clients we are here in this context of Global Compact companies. So what is your message to the companies in respect to how business schools are changing and what kind of value are they providing now in the future? Very quick, we make a round to sum it up. Tim, what is your message?
Well, I think, again, is that we see at ACSB business schools as a force for good. I think, to be quite honest with you, this is aligned in the ways that Sanjeev and the panel have discussed with the trajectory of business in general, is that there is an obligation for the greater world as well as the world around them. And so I think our schools are evolving in their curriculum, in their programs, in their delivery to acknowledge the demands of the greater market, and truthfully, yours, as we talked about yesterday, the expectations of young people today, who are keenly interested in the SDGs, in societal engagement, in societal impact, and want help through their business schools to connect the dots between the two. And this won't happen overnight, but I think it is a transformation that is in fact occurring, and your panel has testified to that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Tim. Andrew.
So I think, of course, business is absolutely central to this conversation as a subject of research, as something that interacts, as something that's an entity that's entities that are recruiting from business schools. I think a couple of sobering lessons. One is that I think although there's this huge passion for sustainability, very often when I talk to employers, they say we would rather hire people with core business skills, let's say in finance, and then add on the expertise around sustainability. So there's a bit of a cautionary tale in perhaps going too far, perhaps in the direction of some of these newer skills if they're at the expense of underlying capacities. I think there's a bit of a mismatch, therefore, in terms of the articulation of what's wanted and what's needed. I also think business leaders will often talk about these things that we've been discussing, societal impact, but there's often a mismatch with then their recruiting departments and the actual specific criteria they're using to hire students. And finally, I think there's a message which again is about data. I mean, we need to hear, all of us, the FT, business schools and others, about what precisely business needs, how we can most meaningfully quantify it, measure it and deliver it. And we'd love to hear more and engage more around that. We lost you, Urs.
I'm sorry. Me again. We need to be brief. We need to watch the time. I'm sorry for that. Sanjeev, what's your message?
Oh no, let me pass it over to Wilfred first. He's been waiting. Wilfred, please.
Please, Wilfred.
I will keep it very short. My wish for the whole industry is, and together with COVID, please embrace open science. If we wait too long with starting with open science, the other disciplines are moving ahead very fast with open science. If we don't embrace open science, we will be left behind in the old empiristic model that we've done for 20 years. And we will not engage and we will stay in the old model. So I hope that these global forums will embrace open science. That's the only thing I would like to say.
Thanks so much. Sanjeev.
Just very quickly, just thank you, Urs, Meta, my incredible colleagues here. Andrew, I hear your mismatch. For us at Thunderbird, the way we think about it is we have to provide world-class skills in finance and accounting and marketing, everything else, and we have to provide world-class skills in sustainable development. And that's really the professional of the future we have to empower. And the faculty have to be researching to be able to empower those professionals of the future.
Thanks so much. Inase.
Okay, I will just say that I echo what Sanjeev has just said, but just to ask businesses to also be cognizant of SDG 17, which is about partnerships. If we're going to make any reasonable progress in this regard, I think that business schools have the convening power to bring together the businesses, the policymakers, as well as the schools to come together and work together towards doing and working towards this business as a force for good.
Thanks so much. What can we learn now in respect to the business schools out of discussion? I made 4 points, four core points. One is we need to define our purpose quite clear and define what we really want. The second, we need to create an integrated research agenda, make our research relevant and make this more regional. Third, we need to educate not experts on sustainability, but integrating all sustainability topics in experts of other functionality, like digital revolution, like Sanjeev said. And finally, the biggest demand we have, need to find ways to measure our impact. So thanks so much to all of you. And this is the end of the discussion, but I want to hand it over now to finish it to Mette. Thanks so much. Mette, please.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dear panel, I've now been listening to this fantastic, excellent panel as I have been muted for 55 minutes, can you believe, on a topic that is close to my heart and a key strategic priority for Prime. Can you imagine how tense this has been the last hour? I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation and I was on how do we identify, how do we account for, how do we impact and measure impact for business schools? Dear Wilfred, Inase, Sanjeev, Andrew, and Tim, thank you so much for your engagement, and not least you, Urs, for taking us through this important dialogue. Next time, I'll be sure to invite myself on this panel on the impact-based university. Thank you so much.